Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Music Podcast, where today I have Mr. Gus Rios with me of Cold Slither. Many of you may know him as the drummer for Gruesome or Left to Die. He's got many band projects, or perhaps from his time in Malevolent Creation. But Gus is a multi-instrumentalist and is here to tell us about a unique new project he has where he plays Zartan. You may remember Zartan from the G.I. Joe series, guitarist and vocalist for Cold Slither, the fictional band from Hasbro's G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero animated series. It's fictional no more. Gus and bandmates have brought Cold Slither to life, and their self-titled debut comes out on July 25th on Reigning Phoenix Music. Gus, it's great to have you, man.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, this is way cool. This doesn't happen all the time where you have a cartoon animated band come to life. So it's pretty exciting, especially if you are a fan of the G.I. Joe, Hasbro collection, which you are, right, Gus?
Massive fan.
Man. So how does this happen? I know you've told this story over and over, but give us an idea of how this comes to life, because you're a musician. I'm used to seeing you on drums, but you're a multi-instrumentalist. You're doing hardcore stuff, thrash, speed metal, stuff like that usually. Hasbro is a toy company, it's it's GI Joe, it's 14 and over kind of thing. How does that translate? What do you do to end up as Zartan in Cold Slither?
So for full backstory, I was actually a guitar player before I was a drummer, and became a drummer out of necessity because there was no good drummers in my area. So I just kind of assumed the role. And then, that's just kind of where the career took me for the longest, but I was still always a guitar player. Actually, at home, when I'm not on tour, I make a living playing guitar and singing in like bars and restaurants and stuff. So that's like my job.
Nice.
So Cold Slither, this idea goes back to when I was in Malevolent Creation and we were signed to Nuclear Blast. Gerardo Martinez, who now is obviously the head of Reigning Phoenix, was the label manager for Nuclear Blast. And when I met him personally, like he must have come to a show in LA or whatever when Malevolent was on tour. He had a G.I. Joe shirt on. And, as soon as we met, I was like, yo, Joe, I'm a Joe guy too. And so we just kind of built this outside of work friendship about, he has this extensive, like as I sit here, like, I got a pretty extensive G.I. Joe collection. And so does he. We love the cartoons. We just love everything about G.I. Joe. And fast forward to, so this is probably like 20 years ago. So about maybe 10 years ago, he's a label guy and he loves G.I. Joe. He's in the business of selling heavy metal. G.I. Joe has a heavy metal band.
It does.
So, I got to credit Gerardo. He's the mastermind. And he called me one day and he's like, hey, man, I have a contact at Hasbro. I want to make Cold Slither happen. Let's see if we can do this. Long story short, it didn't happen. Kind of the toy brand went dormant at Hasbro. They weren't making any new figures or anything. So there's really no reason for Hasbro to get involved or excited about, a 40-year-old lost IP or a forgotten band or whatever. Luckily, this whole time, Cold Slither has built up this cult following of Joe guys that are kind of metal dudes that just love that whole idea. And they've made like their own shirts and, there's like, there's just Cold Slither's this cult thing out, on its own. So then Hasbro comes up with the G.I. Joe Classified series, which is the 6-inch scale figures.
Mm-hmm.
And thankfully, those have been incredibly successful for them. And so I think a year ago, almost to the day, I'm finishing up drums for the Gruesome album, literally on the last day that I'm tracking drums at the studio. Gerardo sends me a text, something to the effect of, "You're going to want to call me as soon as you can," you know, some sort of like urgency, and somewhat out of the blue. And you know, a couple hours later, I call when I was, you know, now I'm like done recording drums for Gruesome, which was a whole other to do and a whole other conversation. Very difficult record to get through. So now I'm like kind of feeling this sense of relief, like I'm done with this record, at least my part of it. Let me see what Gerardo wants. And then he's basically, you know, says, "Hey man, he's sitting down." Because I just got off the phone with Hasbro, and I just immediately knew what that meant. I go, "Come on, man." And he's like, "Dude, Cold Slither." And then he tells me the whole spiel where, like, there's a box set coming out, you know, next month. This is a year ago now. So this is how long it takes for a toy company of that size to really roll something out. They plan this stuff out way in advance. Yep. And, you know, Gerardo probably presented them the idea like, "Hey, man, I'm a Joe guy. I got a record label. I got a guy that can do this. Like, can we do, you know, because it's at the end of the day, it's Hasbro's IP. Like, they have to sign off on it."
Right.
And so I think you just kind of presented them with a really attractive situation where they really didn't have to do anything. You know what I mean? Like, I had to submit song titles for approval because obviously, you know, I can't write songs like "Let's Sever Joe's Head." You know what I mean? Like, right. There's, you know, there's like PC toy parameters that it has to live within. And then I submitted lyrics, and then when they okayed the first song that I had written, and then which gave me the confidence, like, okay, they like what I'm doing. Gerardo likes what I'm doing. I'm just going to run with this, and I just started writing the whole album. You know, so
it's crazy. Any reservations going into it, you know, getting involved with, you know, Hasbro? It's a toy company. It's you know, you're used to playing, writing your stuff with no boundaries, kind of thing. Like you said, you got to work inside of parameters when you're working with a toy company. You know, was there, you know, or as far as, you know, owning your stuff, you know, being able to use what you write, stuff like that, you know, what are the, you know, what is the,
well, that's kind of like a two-part question. You know, going into it, I knew whatever I come up with, it's not really going to be mine. Like, this is still Hasbro's IP. Like,
right.
You know, every interview I've done, the question always comes up, like, "Are you guys going to go on tour? Is there going to be another album?" Completely out. I hope so. Way, like, my dream would be for, yes, a tour to happen and another record, and Cold Slither turns into a band. Like, it's a literal win the lottery dream come true. Completely out of my hands, though. So I knew that. But luckily, I will say this, you know, people know me from playing in death metal bands. But, you know, truth be told, I don't listen to very much death metal. I listen to a lot of different music. So, you know, I guess my point is, I wouldn't want people to think that, like, there's the music's disingenuine. I guess that's my point I want to make. The music, you know, these are songs that I really liked, and they didn't really, the only parameters I had to kind of stay within weren't really set verbally. Like, I just kind of knew,
right,
you know, where to kind of be, just sort of common sense and instinctually. I'm an old school G.I. Joe fan. I'm the target demographic myself. You know, I just was like, what would I want to hear? If there was a Cold Slither record that I wasn't involved with, what would I hope it sounds like?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my thought was, once I had recorded the song Cold Slither, which is the first thing I did, that vocal sort of dictated what the rest of the vocals were going to sound like. And the song Cold Slither, he's not singing like, like a Bon Jovi hair metal guy. He's just sort of, kind of like a heavy metal kind of,
Totally.
mid-tone kind of guy. So that dictated to me what the vocals were going to do. And then, what I wanted to write was a record that heavy metal fans like me would find it to be heavy enough to be like, hey, man, this shit's killer.
Mm-hmm.
But I also wanted it to be accessible enough that if I'm just a G.I. Joe fan and not necessarily a heavy metal fan, it's not going to put me off either.
Right.
So, and again, these are parameters that I set on myself. And luckily, I'm a guy that makes a living for 25 years now playing, cover songs in bars. And, much like a DJ, you get a sense of, what people probably want to hear, whatever,
You
or at
read
least
the
it's
room.
something you're very aware. Right. You read the room. Exactly. Perfect phrase. So I figured this is my gamble of reading what I think the Cold Slither G.I. Joe room is.
Mm-hmm.
So lyrically, I stayed within what I thought would be acceptable by Hasbro, which it was. But I also didn't want it to be completely stupid and childish either. Like, I didn't want it to be like, G.I. Joe is bad and Cobra is going to rule. Like, I didn't want to do that. I wanted it to be, kind of like just adult cool. Because at the end of the day, I'm also aware that kids aren't going to be getting into this record.
Right.
I'm 48 years old. Guys our age are going to be digging this record.
Yeah.
Nobody our age wants to listen to really childish lyrics. I mean, they're obviously more immature or, than like the gruesome lyrics on the latest record or whatever. But, I wanted to write something that I think at the end of the day, my big goal was, if I remove the G.I. Joe element from this album, is it still a good album? Yep. And that was my main goal.
And that's cool. And you did that with the lyrics for sure. That's not corny or cliche for sure. It's the music fits it too. That's a tricky, slippery slope. I would imagine it's extremely hard to write for the average person. But you're not the average person when it comes to G.I. Joe either. You're very in touch. It was a big part of your childhood, right?
Massive. I mean, I recently wrote an article for Decibel magazine.
Mm-hmm.
G.I. Joe for me goes much deeper than just a cartoon on TV or a toy on my shelf. For me as a kid, G.I. Joe was like, I learned right from wrong from G.I. Joe. Like, G.I. Joe taught me to be a proud American, honestly. G.I. Joe taught me to respect the military and to, be grateful for our men and women of the uniform for their service. Like, honestly, like, these things I realize now as an adult were lessons that I learned from G.I. Joe, because I grew up in a pretty chaotic environment at home, and I would escape my reality in these cartoons, and when I would go outside and play with the toys. So like G.I. Joe, when I was tasked with writing this record, while I was obviously excited and super stoked about it, it was this big weight on my shoulder, because I felt like, oh my God, I got to nail this. Like, I can't let G.I. Joe down. Like, that's how I felt. Not even me, not the fans. I can't let G.I. Joe down.
Yeah. Well, you become part of the brand, which is really, really cool. You are isn't that cool? You are part of the brand now for sure. You are Cold Slither. You've brought that to life, and it's what a life it is. It's really cool. It's great, and I'm so glad for you as a fan, and I'm glad for me that a fan was writing it. I would imagine, very few people, other than a fan like yourself, that could do a project like this. I mean, it's
Well, I
fair
think
to
that's the
say.
one thing. I think that's the one thing I really would like to convey, or I would like for the the GI Joe fan base to know is, it's especially in today's world, it's real easy to think. I mean, you even saw it in the comments. This sounds like AI to me. Like you hire just whatever musician to just regurgitate whatever they dictate. Hey, we want a song to sound like this. We want a song to sound like this. And it wasn't that at all. You know, I submitted song titles for approval. They actually included, I think, three of their own, which, you know, was a fun challenge. Like they just sent back song titles, and I had to write lyrics based on the title, which is
Yeah,
kind of fun, actually.
yeah.
And then, you know, I had to write the music to fit these lyrics and these song titles. And you know, again, like I think the one thing I want the fan base to know is like, yeah, dude, like this was done by not, you know, not even a casual. Oh, I like GI Joe when I was a kid. Like, dude, I've had this tattoo for years and years and years now. Like GI Joe means a great deal to me, and it was, you know, kind of one of the honors of my career. It's very interesting, man, to like be in this world that I'm in, where like I play in this band, Gruesome, that pays homage to this other thing that's very important to a lot of people, which is the band Death. So it's similar pressure. You know, making the latest record of Gruesome was the same weight on your shoulder. You're like, oh my God, I can't screw this up. I can't screw this up. I have to deliver, you know, in the name of the fans and in the name of Chuck. Sean Reiner, the drummer on that one of the Death records, was my best friend for 25 years. In the name of him, I had to do him justice.
Yeah.
The same. It's like as soon as I did, literally, it's kind of funny. The day I finished recording drums and felt good about the performance that I gave, I was immediately tasked that same day with this other big thing, and it was just, you know. But they're, you know, I'm blessed, man. Like what a great position to be in. Like amazing.
Yeah, it's great, man, and I'm so happy for you. It's really, really cool
Thank
to
you.
see you doing this, man. You know, and like I say, I'm so glad it was you, because you are vested. You're a fan, and you live the stuff, and that comes through in the way the lyrics are written, the way you sing them. You know, the whole spirit of this record is very much a GI Joe universe thing, and it's you know, it doesn't sound corny. You know, that was my first thought, really. You know, I heard, you know, the Hasbro's putting out this Cold Slither record. It's, you know, GI Joe universe, and I was like, well, not everybody can do that, you know, not for me as an adult. You know, is this going to be a kids record kind of thing? You know, I had a lot of questions, and it's like you say, if you take the GI Joe name off of it, it's still a cool record to listen to, man. I mean, it's
Thank
yeah,
you, man. I mean, that was my number one intended. I mean, really, the pinnacle of my number one intended goal was for this to just be a good heavy metal slash hard rock album, like just of good songs that, I guess, you know, my hope. And I remember talking to Gerardo about this. I was like, man, what I want is, you know, for people to either buy the vinyl, the CD, or whatever, or even if you just listen to it on streaming, oh, let me listen to that Cold Slither record. And then at the end of it, be like, man, I kind of want to hear that again. Like that was a good record.
yeah,
You know, I guess selfishly, I'm hoping that that's what creates demand for a tour, and that Hasbro sees this demand and thinks, hey, this is a good idea. Yeah, go ahead and go on tour, because then I get to play Zartan for like a month straight or whatever,
how
which
cool.
is just
Yeah,
amazing to me.
yeah. You know, I mean, look at the likeness, man. I mean, it's you. You know what I'm saying? There we go. I love it, man.
I mean, you know, it's funny. Like, I have it here. Yellow pants.
Look at that, man.
red wig.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, you know
Okay. You
the
got
whole
the whole.
spiel is here.
That's cool. Now you're doing a show. You got San Diego Comic Con 2025 coming up, July 24th, Brick by Brick Club in San Diego. You're going to be wearing those pants and that wig. Is that how this is going to work?
Dude, you know, it's funny, man. I've actually had to go to my studio. It took me about 2 or 3 times doing it, but I had to put all the stuff on to get comfortable playing with a wig on. And I got these big platform fucking boots and, you know, like the whole get up. Because I remember the first day I did it, I was like, oh boy, this is a learning curve. Because, you know, I have no hair. And you know, you got all this hair in your face, and like you got these boots on, clicking pedals on the floor was challenging. But luckily, by like the third day I did it, I was like, all right, I think I'm actually pretty comfortable with it. So yeah,
Yeah.
but everybody's gonna, you know, because my thing with the live show, first and foremost, I wanted to work with friends, and thankfully, I have very talented friends. And you know, Matt Harvey was kind of like him and Ross. I knew were going to be my absolute must-have guys because Ross is a giant GI Joe guy like me,
Awesome.
and Matt's just a super talented dude, and he's like a big comic book nerd too. And he, you know, he obviously grew up, knows all about GI Joe. And then the drummer is a friend of mine locally who's from England, has a mohawk, has toured for 25 years with a band called KMFDM, so he's a pro.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Matt and Ross are pros. You know, I've been doing this forever, so we're going to deliver a pro level live show. But I also wanted to make sure, again, if I was a fan in that audience and 4 dudes came out that didn't look like what I wanted them to look like, I would be disappointed. So. Right. It's going to look like, I mean, minus all the ridiculous muscles. That's the one thing I said. I go, hey man, you know, Cold Slither let themselves go a little bit. I'm 48 years old, man. I don't have no 6-pack abs and shit, but you know, but we will have the look going and stuff. So it'll be fun, man. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, that's cool. You know, and I think I had Gene Hoglan on a while back, and you know, you guys have a lot of similarities. He plays, you know, he was in Death for a little while, and plays in.
Gene's a buddy.
Yeah, cool. But he plays in Death Clock, which
right,
you know, an animated band come to life. Same kind of thing he was telling me about the show. You know, what he hears in his in-ears and how he has to sync it to the video screen. And it's a really complex kind of really rigid, you know, you have to be spot on or it's not going to work kind of thing. There's so much.
Right, because when they play, what I mean, I've never seen them live. So when they play, it's basically the crowd sees the animation and the live band is behind it, correct?
Yeah, I think they may be in front of it, but there's no front lighting. So you may see the silhouettes with the screen. I'm not real sure. I haven't seen them myself. So, but we're talking about that, you know, whole thing, and you know, so he's playing in the dark too. You know, he's got a small light and everything, and he's got the screen in front of him, like on a MacBook or something like that. But you know, I think he had a click track in his ear, and you know, he's got to fit that video, or it's
or it's off, right, or it fails.
Yeah. So it was a real complex thing, really different and a big challenge. Would you be open to? Yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities with what you're doing with Cold Slither. Very much the same. You could have screens. You could have live, you know, characters. You know, there's many options.
I mean, Ross and I, again, you know, Ross is a big GI Joe nerd like me, and him and I had an hour-long conversation just the other night, just going over a million ideas for the show. You know, we have the advantage of it's Comic-Con, so there's a potential for a lot of GI Joe cosplayers to be in town.
Yep.
You know, it's just a matter of how can we reach them And yeah, you could have a thing where like G.I. Joe comes in and tries to shut the show down
Right.
because you guys work for Cobra and blah, blah, blah. Like, man, there's all kinds of crazy stuff. We're going to have two TV screens and we're going to include some video element, but obviously nothing to where what Death Clock does. Like, there's going to
Right.
be no animation to the music. Like, we're going to play live. Not that they don't play live, but what the audience sees is the live band, not the screens.
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's got to be an exciting thing. I mean, you play music, you be in bands, and that's fun. I mean, that's what you do, and that's what we love. But this is a whole different kind of ball of wax. It's got to be, it's got to be kind of fun to step into Zartan's boots, so to speak.
I have to remind myself, me in particular, to just not get too much into here about it, and to just go back to that. Like, at the end of the day, I play guitar and sing for people. I'm literally going to, as soon as I wrap up this interview, I got to pack up my car and go play a gig. You know what I mean? It's what I do.
Yeah.
So same thing with like, last year I did some shows. We played some big festivals with Left to Die, which are, Rick and Terry, original members from Death.
Yeah.
And we were playing, a Death record in its entirety in front of tens of thousands of people, which can overwhelm you. And you have to strip it back down to just, hey, this is what I do. It's just the sort of the situation around me changes, but what I'm doing does not change. So just stick to that. And so, because the Cold Slither thing could certainly get overwhelming, because like I've already seen comments online that people are like, man, I just hope I can get into this show because this thing's going to sell out. And, it's at Comic-Con. It's the biggest, event of that style in the world. I'm hoping it's completely just asses to elbows sold out. I honestly hope for that. Like, that fuels me. But I also know that everybody in there is going to be like,
yeah,
are these, there's going to be some of this, and they're like, okay,
right.
can these guys deliver? And
how legit is
again,
this? Yeah.
right. So I think, everybody in the band's a pro. The drummer plays in KMFDM. Like, he's already like building sessions from the album that he can rehearse to. We are going to actually play to a click because there's samples on, all those G.I. Joe cartoon samples that are in the music on the album. They're going to be there live. So it's going to be to a click. Right. So you can hear those samples. But, everything else is us playing live for real. Yeah. And, real amps, real guitars, real drums. Like, it's a fucking band. So, yeah. I'm hoping by the end of the first chorus, everybody's like, okay, cool. This is a real rock show. I'm in.
I'm sure.
And because the visuals there,
Right. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure it'll be spectacular, man. It's really cool. I'm used to seeing you behind a kit. And you play a lot of drums on a lot of recordings. Started as a guitar player though. Was there a decision when you were making the band, your role? Did you ever say, I play drums in this band?
No, honestly, it's an interesting thing, which it's a wider personal thing that I've gone through. When 5 years ago, when Sean Reinert, my best friend, passed away, he was also my like North Star drum hero. He was my mentor. I admittedly, like, a little spark went out for me, and it made me sad to play drums for a couple of years at least. And, I just dove back into guitar full time, once the pandemic kind of cleared up and we could all go back to work here in Florida. I just went back to work as a guitar player.
Okay.
and as a singer. So for 5 years now, I live in this world of my full time job is to be a singer and a guitar player, and I play drums when I go on tour. So I played all the instruments on the Cold Slither record, but I sang the songs. People are going to want to hear that singer, so I knew immediately I was going to be the front man for this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
And
cool, man.
I wanted to be like it was, it was, and also, it's 25, 30 years of being behind a drum set, looking at three other dudes' asses all night.
Right.
It's kind of fun. It's kind of fun to be up front and really interact with the audience. Like that's attractive to me now. I think that's cool.
Yeah, yeah, and as a fan, you don't really think about that. You're always looking from the front. That drummer's missing a lot of things. He doesn't see the crowd
Dude,
much. It's
That's
like,
a that's a whole other conversation. Like I remember, funny enough, like even during the pandemic, like right when the world shut down, I remember I started watching a lot of live music on YouTube.
mhm,
Um, just to it's this whole mental thing of your whole world is just taken from you in this blink of an eye. On March 17th, 2020. And I just started watching a bunch of live stuff, and then I came across Gruesome live at Vakken or something, and there was all these people, and I was like, I don't remember any of that. I didn't really see the
right.
audience, and that's when it really dawned on me. I'm like, man, you're kind of behind this thing,
Yeah,
in particular when you play metal and you have big drum kits. There's kind of a wall between you and the audience,
yeah,
several layers, even because there's a band in front of you and then there's a drum set in front of you. So you're really disconnected. And then when I became a full-time guitar player, and right at the beginning, here in Florida, man, venues were packed to the gills because remember, everybody was just shut in.
yeah.
And when we could all go back out, I remember, trial by fire. Almost like day one, I'm on stage playing guitar and singing, and there's like 350 people in this restaurant club, and I was like, holy shit, this is totally different than being a drummer. I better deliver. And thankfully now, 5 years later, I'm pretty comfortable in that environment,
Yeah.
and I've grown to really enjoy it, man.
It's great, man. It's great. It's great to see you out there, man. And I know you've had your
Thank you.
struggles, and I appreciate you opening up to that Decibel, a couple articles you've written, I read. It's not everybody, it takes some bravery and courage to get out there and talk about the stuff you're talking about, and you're helping other people, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, and there'll be a link to the suicide hotline here for anybody that's struggling and stuff like that. It's so important, man, and it's a blessing.
The saddest thing about it is in our community of metal, I mean, just the fact that there's a whole subgenre called doom metal. I mean, it's a whole genre based on depression, and I feel like I'm the only one talking about it.
Yeah,
And when that article came out, I remember I was like sick to my stomach, mortified, because I was like, what did I just do? I just told the whole world I'm insane. Like my family didn't even know what happened. My family found out when they read that article. And the amount of messages I got was hundreds. It was super overwhelming. But I remember my kind of takeaway was like, God damn it, man. There's so many people that suffer in silence, and just because of shame and the stigma, they don't talk about it, And for me to be this, I guess I wish I was more famous so I could make more of an impact and help more people.
yeah.
But, I guess I did what I could.
You sure did, man. And, I know that it's helped tons. When you're, because we're a family when, this metal community that we have. And,
I say that all the time.
it really is like that. And, and a lot of times there's a masculinity to it to where, I'm a tough guy and I can, I'm not talking about this. This is weak or whatever. For somebody like yourself, so ingrained into this community and those things to come out and say, it's kind of like Halford coming out and saying he's gay. It makes it acceptable. And for you to come out and, admit the attempted suicide and the depression, and that says, hey, maybe I'm in the same boat. It's okay. It's okay to talk about. It's okay to get help. So it's a blessing, man. It really,
I
really
mean,
is.
I receive messages from guys in pretty big bands who, shared with me that they felt the same way. And, I remember thinking to myself, well, then why didn't you say something?
Yeah.
Like if the more people, if more people would come out of prominence in our community and say, hey, I deal with this shit too, that's just going to reach more people that won't feel alone. Because I can tell you, the worst part of all of it when you're at that really worst low point is you feel completely isolated and alone, and you feel like the world is just better off without you in it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm going to say pretty much 100% of the time, that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great what you're doing, Gus, musically,
Thank
but
you.
personally too. It's a blessing, man. It's a blessing to still have you with us. Thank you, man.
Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
July 25th on Raining Phoenix Music. You can coldslitherofficial.com, I believe it is. Catch them at San Diego Comic Con, Brick by Brick on July 24th, performing. It's going to be a great show. It's a great record. Gus, thank you, man. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Scott. I
All right.
appreciate it, buddy.
I'll talk to you soon, bud. Take
All
care.
right, man.
Bye.
Bye bye.